We did it. We delivered the mother of all deals. We are creating a market of 2 billion people. And this is the tale of two giants, the world's second and fourth largest economies.
January 27th, 2026. The mother of all deals. 18 years in making. 2 billion people, $27 trillion, larger than the entire United States economy. Europe and India just built the world's biggest free trade zone. But here's the part that's getting lost in the coverage. They did not just sign a trade deal. They signed a defense partnership the same day in the same ceremony. Europe is now sharing military technology with a country that openly buys Russian weapons. And the headlines? European wines get cheaper in India, or BMW tariffs to drop from 110% to 10%. Cheese exporters celebrate market access. That is not the story. The story is that this is the day the post-American world became operational. Two of the world's biggest powers looked at American chaos and Chinese aggression and decided they are done playing by someone else's rules. Not with statements or declarations, with structure. Defense partnerships, technology sharing, strategic alignment that bypasses Washington entirely. And Washington knows it. Trump's Treasury Secretary went on ABC on Sunday and accused Europe of, quote-unquote, financing the war against themselves. That is not diplomatic language. That is panic, because they just realized what actually happened in New Delhi. Hello everyone, my name is Raman, and this is the Raman Effect, where we reveal geopolitical patterns hiding in plain sight. And what happened in New Delhi on January 27th was not about cheaper BMWs or wine tariffs. It was about the architecture of a new world order being built right in front of us. Let me show you what's really happening. So here's what everyone thinks they know. India and the European Union finally closed a free trade agreement after 18 years of negotiations. Good for both economies. Makes sense given Trump's aggressive tariffs. 50% on India, 15% on Europe. Classic de-risking move. But that is a surface story. The real story is about Europe making a calculated bet that the US-led order is over, and India accepting that they need a plan B beyond America. Not tomorrow, not someday, right now. Look at what both sides gave up simultaneously. Europe dropped its insistence on Russia condemnation language from the agreement. They signed a defense partnership with India without demanding India stop buying Russian oil or Russian weapons. That is extraordinary. Europe has spent 2 years building its entire strategic identity around opposing Russia's war in Ukraine, and they just partnered with India, which is Russia's strategic partner and Russia's biggest defense customer. Europe knows India's military runs on Russian systems. They are not asking India to rip that out. They are choosing to sit at the same table because in 2026, the fear of being left behind is greater than the desire to isolate Putin. Now flip the coin. India opened its automobile sector, the most protected market in the Indian economy, with tariffs dropping from 110% to 10% eventually. This is the sector that killed the deal in 2013. For 13 years, India refused to budge, but now they are opening the gates. When both sides give up their reddest lines at the same moment, that is not negotiation, that is desperation. Both parties saw something that scared them more than their domestic political costs. But what scared them? The prospect of being left out entirely as the world splits between superpowers. But they did not just sign a trade deal. They signed a security and defense partnership on the same day. Europe is offering India participation in EU defense initiatives. They are establishing an annual security and defense dialogue. They are creating an India-EU defense industry forum to collaborate on manufacturing, innovation, and technology. That does not happen for trade. That happens when you are building something structural that outlasts any single administration or government. So how did we get here? This deal did not just suddenly happen. In fact, it died in 2013, dramatically, after 15 rounds of negotiations. The mainstream narrative says it collapsed over India's automobile protectionism. That's true, but that is incomplete. The real breakdown was about who set the rules. In 2013, Europe came to the table assuming India would accept EU standards wholesale, environmental regulations, labor laws, intellectual property frameworks, the whole package. Europe was offering market access in exchange for India conforming to European norms. India said no, because in 2013, India was still a supplicant economy trying to prove itself. Accepting Europe's terms would have locked them into a subordinate position. But here's what changed between 2013 and 2026 in 13 years. It's not just Donald Trump's tariffs or the Ukraine war. Those are symptoms. The underlying disease is this: the entire architecture of global power shifted. In 2013, the United States was the undisputed hegemon. Europe was comfortable under the American security umbrella. NATO was unquestioned. The transatlantic alliance was the organizing principle of Western foreign policy. And India was rising but still betting primarily on the US partnership as its long-term strategic anchor. That world is now gone. By 2026, the US under Donald Trump has become totally unpredictable to the point of hostility towards its own allies. For example, Trump threatened to seize Greenland, a territory of Denmark, a EU member state. He imposed tariffs on EU despite a prior trade agreement. He called India the tariff king and slapped them with 50% duties, half of which was explicit punishment for buying Russian oil. Europe looked at that and realized, we cannot rely on American protection anymore. Not militarily, not economically, not strategically. On the other side, India looked at that and realized betting everything on Washington is a losing game. We need options. On the other side, China looked strong in 2013. By 2026, China's economy is slowing. Real estate sector is imploding, and their assertiveness has made them enemies with half of Asia. But they still control critical supply chains, rare earths, electronics, manufacturing inputs. Both Europe and India are trapped in Chinese dependencies they desperately want to escape. That's why negotiations that were dead for 13 years suddenly concluded in 3 years once they restarted in 2022. The geopolitical circumstances forced both the sides to compromise on things they had refused to compromise on before. And that brings us to what is actually happening beneath the surface. Let us break down what's really being built here. Europe is offering India participation in EU defense initiatives, sharing military technology with a country whose military runs on Russian systems. Sukhoi fighters, T-90 tanks, BrahMos missiles, S-400 air defense. Europe has spent 2 years isolating Russia militarily. Now they are partnering with Russia's biggest defense customer. Why? Europe looked at the strategic map and realized if the US pulls back from NATO, they need alternative security partnerships. India can't replace America militarily, but India can be part of a network that provides collective security without American dominance. More critically, Europe needs India's manufacturing scale. European defense production is sophisticated but expensive and small scale. India has capacity, engineering talent, and a massive growing defense budget. Together, they could create an alternative to both American and Chinese defense ecosystems. And here's a calculation. Europe explicitly accepts India's Russia relationship as a price of partnership. That's not Europe being naive, that's Europe breaking from the transatlantic consensus on Russia. Not publicly, not dramatically, but structurally. They have decided strategic alignment with India matters more than absolute unity with Washington on isolating Moscow. Now flip to the China dimension, because this is where both Europe and India's incentives perfectly align. Both are trapped in Chinese supply chains. Europe's dependence spans rare earth minerals, clean technologies, advanced manufacturing inputs. And according to recent analysis, China accounts for 90% of rare earth processing globally. India's trap is different but equally severe. Nearly 40% of India's electronics and telecommunications imports come from China. Both tried to decouple alone. Europe pushed strategic autonomy but could not find alternative supply sources at scale. And India launched Make in India but still depends on Chinese industrial components for everything from smartphones to solar panels. Together, India and European Union can actually build the alternative. Europe brings technology, capital, and market access. India brings manufacturing scale, engineering talent, and a billion-person consumer market that's growing at 6% annually. The EU-India manufacturing corridor they are creating bypasses China entirely. And Washington, on the other side, is staring at something they didn't even anticipate. Donald Trump's entire trade strategy was built on using tariffs as leverage to force bilateral deals where America extracts maximum concessions. The assumption: everyone needs American market access more than America needs them. That just stopped working. India and Europe did not come to Washington begging for tariff relief. In fact, the EU went the other way, indefinitely freezing the trade deal with the US and walking away from the table in response to Washington's threats over Greenland and Denmark. Exactly a week later, European Union built something bigger with India than any bilateral US deal. Defense cooperation, technology sharing, supply chain integration bundled into one structural package. And from Washington's perspective, this looks like betrayal. Treasury Secretary Besant's comments and ABC were not diplomatic concern. They were accusation. His subtext was clear. We sacrificed economically by tariffing India to pressure them on Russia. Europe is now rewarding the same India despite continued Russian ties. You are undermining our leverage. But Washington is missing one major point. This is not Europe rewarding India. This is two superpowers who both looked at American unpredictability and Chinese assertiveness and decided we need each other more than we need these superpower approval. The question for America becomes, what do you do when your allies stop asking permission? This is the game being played beneath the surface, not dramatic declarations of new alliances, just structural positioning for a world where the old rules do not apply anymore. But here's the Trump's problem. He will react, and he always does. By the time I upload this video, the reaction must have already come. But there are very few options left for President Trump, and every option makes things worse. He can escalate tariffs, which only proves India and EU's point about American unreliability and pushes them closer together. He can try to offer a better deal, but they already built what they wanted without him. Or he can back down, which means admitting his entire tariff strategy failed. Those are his options, and he taught his allies they cannot trust America. Now he is discovering what happens when they stop asking for permission. Meanwhile, Beijing is running a very different calculation, and they should be terrified, in fact, because they just watched their worst nightmare materialize in real time. Two democratic giants building an alternative that bypasses China's supply chains entirely, and this is not about economics. It's defense, it's technology, it's a kind of deep integration that takes a decade to unwind once it's built. Xi Jinping spent 10 years constructing Belt and Road to make the world dependent on Chinese infrastructure. Prime Minister Modi and EU President von der Leyen just showed the world the exit door. But here's where it gets really very interesting. Watch the dominoes start to fall. Japan is watching this very carefully, and they are thinking maybe we don't need to choose between Washington and Beijing either. South Korea is running the exact same calculation. ASEAN countries are reconsidering every strategic bet they have made about alignment and partnerships. Even the United Kingdom, caught between Trump's chaos and Europe's new direction, is quietly re-evaluating everything. Because what everyone just learned is that there is a third option now. A real one, not theoretical but structural and operational. Two democratic powers with massive markets that do not require anyone's approval to build something new. And then there is Vladimir Putin. He's watching this more carefully than anyone. And from Moscow's perspective, this is not a threat, it is indeed an opportunity. Because Europe just partnered with India, a country that openly buys Russian weapons and energy without requiring India to condemn Moscow or cut ties. Think about what that means when the Ukraine war eventually ends, and it will end. Europe is going to need channels back to Russia. You cannot maintain a permanent wall against a nuclear-armed neighbor. And when that day comes, India will be the bridge. Europe gets diplomatic access to Moscow without going through Washington. On the other side, Russia maintains economic relationships through India despite Western sanctions. India becomes the connector that everyone needs, profiting from being trusted by all the sides. What actually happened between India and EU matters more than anyone realizes. Two civilizations looked at a world where superpowers cut deals over everyone else's heads and decided, not anymore. They are not choosing between America's leadership and China's dominance. They are building a third pole. You see, America still has the raw military power to invade countries and reshape governments. They proved that with Venezuela, and nobody can stop them. But they just lost something more valuable than military force: the ability to organize consent among their allies. The European Union is not following American lead anymore. They are building their own architecture. The world order did not shift with bombs and declarations, it shifted with a handshake in New Delhi. And by the time Washington and Beijing fully comprehend what just happened, the new architecture will be too deeply embedded to dismantle. Welcome to the post-American world. It's not coming someday, it is already here. When your allies build their own pole instead of asking you to mediate, you are no longer the hegemon, you are just another player. Most people just haven't noticed yet. This is the Raman effect on the mother of all deals. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next episode.